Welcome to the first video in a new series on the channel where I debunk some of the worst Bleach takes ever. The aim of these videos is to help stop the spread of misinformation from people who don't know what they are talking about. In each video, we will cover a few misconceptions as we work our way through the most diabolical Bleach takes imaginable. I'm shocked at the amount of bad takes that still persist about Bleach in the big old year of 2025. So for those of you who have found yourselves arguing about the most brain-dead Bleach takes, then this series is for you. In this video, I'll be debunking 3 of the most annoying Bleach takes, so be sure to stick around until the end of the video as I will be proving why Bleach has some of the best foreshadowing in all of shonen anime and manga. So without further delay, let's bury these shit takes once and for all. The first bad take that we'll cover is Ichigo has no character development. This is one of the most persistent misconceptions as people confuse Ichigo's subtle, trauma-driven progression with aimless writing. Anyone who says that Ichigo has no growth has totally missed how his mother's death defines his protective nature, with how each story arc reshapes his outlook, from the Soul Society arc where he learns responsibility, during the Arrancar arc where he suffers from despair, in the Fullbring arc where he has a total identity crisis, and then the Thousand Year Blood War arc where he accepts his true self. Ichigo isn't the type of protagonist who screams about friendship and suddenly becomes stronger. Bleach has psychological storytelling that requires you to actually pay attention to subtext. Ichigo's character arc begins with one pivotal moment that reshapes his entire existence. This is the death of his mother Masaki when he was only 9 years old. Before that day, multiple sources describe him as a happy-go-lucky, goofy kid who constantly smiled when his mother was around. Her death transforms Ichigo into the serious, scowling character that we meet in chapter 1. So this is a major personality shift that occurs before the chronological beginning of the story, establishing that Ichigo's core trauma drives everything which follows in the story. His father telling him that his name means to protect one thing becomes his defining psychological prison. Combined with the guilt over failing to save his mother, this creates his pattern of shouldering responsibility alone and his fear of powerlessness. As early as chapter 18 of the manga, we learn Ichigo tells Rukia that he was responsible for his mother's death. He doesn't realize that he was only a child, but this guilt shapes everything about him. Even before the death of his mother, he had a desire to protect his sisters as he had joined a karate dojo to get stronger. Following Masaki's death, Ichigo would get into fights regularly with thugs in order to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Here is where people completely miss the point. Ichigo's growth isn't linear. Real trauma recovery never really is. Each story arc of Bleach forces him to confront different aspects of his damage in ways that build upon each other. And Kubo himself has stated that after volume 50, Ichigo was the most developed character in the series. The Soul Society arc teaches Ichigo that his actions have consequences beyond his immediate circle. His reckless fighting style gets people hurt, forcing him to develop strategic thinking, and when Byakuya breaks his sword, it's not just a power moment, it's Ichigo learning that raw emotion isn't enough to defeat the opponent. He needs to understand his opponent and respect the weight of his decisions. His inner hollow interrupts him during his battle against Byakuya, leading to Orihime getting hurt by Ukiura, and then when Grimmjow defeats him, he cannot prevent Rukia from being hurt, and multiple sources note that his depression and insecurity directly impacted his fighting abilities here. When Ichigo undergoes training with the Vizards only to then lose control of his inner hollow during his battle against Ukiura, it leads to him being afraid again of using his hollow powers, and he doesn't overcome this fear until he enters his inner world and he learns the final Getsuga Tensho. This is realistic because sometimes when you think you have healed, life ends up kicking you in the teeth and all of those old feelings come flooding back. Following Ichigo's battle against Aizen where he loses his powers, we then have the Fullbring arc which effectively resets the entire Bleach story. The story arc is heavily centered around the development of Ichigo, but for some reason people think that the Fullbring arc is filler content. If they are skipping this story arc, then it explains why they think that Ichigo has no character development. Without his Shinigami powers, Ichigo faces the fundamental question of who he is if he is no longer able to save everyone. There's a reason why the Fullbring arc is one of my favorite story arcs of Bleach. It's an incredible case study into the psychology of Ichigo as he deals with his powerlessness. Then you have the 1000-Year Blood War arc, which perfectly completes Ichigo's character journey by forcing him to accept his hybrid nature as he learns about the true reasoning behind the death of his mother and that Yhwach had caused her death via Ashvalan. She was stripped of her Quincy powers and thus was vulnerable to attack from the Hollow Grand Fisher, thus giving Ichigo the closure that he needs in order to forgive himself. He was not responsible for Masaki's death. During the Blades meet, Ichigo learns to accept his inner hollow as a part of his true Zanpakuto, and he learns to no longer ask for help from Old Man Zangetsu or his inner hollow. Now that Ichigo isn't rejecting an integral aspect of his inherited abilities, and with him having awakened his Quincy powers, Ichigo awakens his true potential, especially after Old Man Zangetsu stops suppressing his power. This very brief summary is enough evidence of the growth that Ichigo undergoes. Early on in the story, Ichigo operates reactively on emotion, and he maintains a solitary approach to problems as he shoulders the burden of protecting everyone. He sees the world in black and white, and he acts from guilt rather than purpose. Ichigo demonstrates proactive, strategic thinking, and he accepts teamwork, understanding moral complexity, and he operates from resolved purpose during the final arc. He learns each of these aspects as the story of Bleach progresses. Look at the early chapters of Bleach where Ichigo refuses to listen to Rukia as he only wants to use his powers to protect his loved ones and not every other soul that is being troubled by hollows. He grows to such an extent that he even begins to save hollows when he arrives in Hueco Mundo as he protects Nell from the Espada. There are several moments in Bleach where Ichigo tells his friends to step back and allow him to handle the situation, but by the end of Bleach during the 1000-Year Blood War arc, we see him team up with Orihime as they battle Yhwach together. All of this is subtle character development, and it's not the superficial kind that a lot of shonen fans are used to. They think that just because Ichigo doesn't have this wild, over-the-top goal of becoming a Hokage or fighting strong opponents or even becoming a pirate king, it means that Ichigo has no character development when this is far from the case. I've used this example in the past before, but Ichigo is the anime equivalent to Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't have this larger-than-life goal. Spider-Man's juggling two different personas, as both Ichigo and Spider-Man deal with the responsibility of having power, how this affects their day-to-day life, and how their trauma has burdened them in their own respective ways. From how Spider-Man's affected by Uncle Ben's death and how Ichigo is affected by Masaki's death. Another reason why people claim Ichigo is poorly written is because he is reactionary and thus uninteresting to follow. The opposite of being reactive is to be proactive. This is a character who takes charge of the story as opposed to reacting to events that occur around them. Proactive protagonists are often defined as having clearly defined goals like Naruto and Luffy. Proactive characters are very likable as it's easy to cheer for someone with ambition, as it's a relatable quality to possess. Shonen anime and manga fans are used to character-driven stories where the protagonist has this larger-than-life goal. They then use these as templates for all other anime and manga to aspire to be like. If your character has no goal, then he must be boring and reactionary. Ichigo doesn't aspire towards anything. He doesn't want to be the head captain of the Gotei 13. I guess this must mean that Kubo is a terrible writer. Takes like this come from people who don't know how to think for themselves, and they are regurgitating opinions that they've heard in a YouTube video or a Reddit hot take. Is it true that a protagonist without a clearly defined goal is a bad protagonist? If you think that a goal is the only interesting thing that we should be following a protagonist for, then you are mistaken. There is more to a character arc than witnessing the successful completion of a goal. In addition to this, a character who is void of a goal can still make proactive decisions within a plot. Just because someone like Ichigo doesn't have this big goal, it doesn't mean that they automatically become reactionary. In general, protagonists are reactive most of the time, but they demonstrate proactive decision making through their responses to situations and the subsequent actions that they take. The story is then impacted by a mixture of the protagonist's actions and reactions, and how these impact the world around them. Answer this for me: if Ichigo is indeed reactive, boring, and passive all of the time, then would his absence be felt upon the world? If Ichigo did nothing to progress the plot, then Rukia would be dead. Ichigo's inner hollow would have assumed control over his being. Ukiura would have killed Orihime, Aizen would have taken over the Soul King, Ginjo would have struggled to recruit Ichigo into execution in order to steal his powers, and when it comes to the Thousand Year Blood War arc, without Ichigo, Yhwach would have taken over reality and returned it back to its primordial state. As you can see, with Ichigo having no clearly defined goal, it does not mean that he is reactionary and poorly written. Ichigo's actions as a protagonist directly affect the world of Bleach which Ichigo resides in. Believing that things are happening to him and he has no control over them only serves to prove how little attention some fans have been paying to the story of Bleach. Bleach ultimately is a different type of story to One Piece and Naruto, and people find issues when attempting to compare Bleach to them. Fans assume that having a protagonist who wants to be the king or top of something is the only successful formula for how to tell a shonen story. These fans completely overlook manga like Yu Yu Hakusho or JoJo's Part 4, which also feature protagonists with no clearly defined goals. But both Yusuke and Josuke are still interesting characters to follow. In storytelling, you are often told that your protagonist needs to be likable and relatable. When you ask fans of Bleach, they'll tell you that one of the best qualities of Ichigo is that he is very relatable. With him not having this wild out there goal, Ichigo comes across as more of a believable character to follow. It's not a bad thing to have no direction in certain parts of your life, and it is entirely natural and very common to not know what you want to do or achieve, and Ichigo also embodies this in his normal life. Like, look at the start of the Fullbring arc, he isn't afraid to admit that he doesn't know what he wants to do after school. Another relatable aspect to Ichigo is his struggle to find out who he is. Like a lot of us, Ichigo struggles with finding himself. For him, this manifests with his difficulty to actually identify the origin of his powers. This holds him back from actualizing his full potential, since he rejects aspects of his powers like the nature of his hollow abilities. Similarly, there may be parts of ourselves or our own lives that we are in direct opposition to. Ultimately, this may be our own downfall if we never learn to accept these parts of ourselves and learn to live with the negative experiences that have shaped us into who we are today. Ichigo may not like that he has hollow abilities, but he has to accept this part of himself because they are a crucial aspect of his powers, which he learns to embrace during The Blade Is Me. I could go on and on, but I do have a 90-minute complete breakdown of Ichigo's character, which I highly recommend if you still think that Ichigo is poorly written or that he has no character development. So definitely go check out that video after this one, as it does a great job of breaking down every single aspect of his character. The second bad take is a power scaling one, and this is where people believe that Bleach is only mountain level or Bleach is not even hill level. The Bleach being mountain level downplay is infamous within power scaling communities, and people cite the mountain collapse during Ichigo vs Aizen as the ceiling of Bleach's universe, while ignoring higher feats like Dangai Ichigo warping time and space, Yhwach rewriting entire futures, Yamamoto's Bankai threatening the Soul Society itself. This take really makes me want to throw my phone out the window. The ignorance that is required to look at Bleach's cosmology and to conclude mountain level is honestly impressive in its wrongness. The mountain destruction scene which people cite as Bleach's power ceiling is from Ichigo's battle against Aizen. The mountain being destroyed was environmental damage from Ichigo parrying Aizen's attack. This was collateral damage, it wasn't the maximum output from either of the fighters. Both characters were operating at transcendent levels here. Aizen couldn't even sense Ichigo's spiritual pressure because he was so far beyond him. Ichigo trained within the Dangai, which is a realm separated from space and time itself, with the density of time there being 2,000 times higher than normal dimensions. He achieved power that transcended dimensional boundaries, as it stated multiple times that he was in a state beyond normal Shinigami limitations. Now let's talk about some real feats. Yamamoto's Bankai would be able to incinerate the entire Soul Society. This is if it was active for too long. The Soul Society is confirmed as a universal realm in scale with its own starry sky. Chapter 148 shows stars clearly depicted during Kaname Tozen's flashback. Chapter 578 shows Gremmy creating a void of outer space as we see countless stars and galaxies that are visible. The Soul Society also houses Muken, an infinite dimension used as a prison, proving that it can contain infinite space. The Soul King was also revealed to have created and separated the original primordial universe of Bleach into multiple realms, and the Soul King maintains the balance of all of these dimensions. The death of the Soul King would cause all of the realms to collapse and merge back into the primordial sea. The Garganta serves as an infinite void which contains all other dimensions, and it's stated to be infinite or infinitely expanding, and this space hosts the different realms of Bleach within its dark expanse. Each of the three main realms of the world of the living, Hueco Mundo and the Soul Society, have their own space-time continuums, meaning each is a self-contained universe with its own flow of time and space. This explains why Shinigami with high spiritual pressure have lifespans that eclipse ordinary humans. The Dangai has massive time distortion too, where 2000 hours equals 1 hour in the outside world. According to people who know how to scale, Bleach ranges from city level plus for high tier characters to multi-galaxy level for god tier characters, with some having universe level plus capabilities. To be worthy of becoming the Soul King, you need to withstand the physical weight of all of the realms, meaning that any Soul King candidate needs to scale to the entire Bleach universe. When Ichigo gains his true Zanpakuto after training at the Soul King's palace, he scales above the Zero Division members, who can individually make all three universal realms tremble when they activate their Bankai. But despite this, the Zero Division members were weaker than both Yhwach and N-Series Ichigo. This evidence shows that universal plus scaling is minimum for these top tier characters like Ichigo and Yhwach. The evidence is overwhelming, and if you just open your eyes and read the Bleach manga, you'll see that pushing this mountain level scaling for Bleach in 2025 is just being willfully ignorant, and it's proof that you haven't read Bleach. If you want to learn more about the cosmology and scaling of Bleach, then check out my video on the Bleach cosmology, where I break down each of the realms and explain why some of the characters can scale up to universal level. The third take we'll be debunking is Kubo didn't plan anything, or Bleach has no foreshadowing and it's just retcons, or Kubo making it up on the spot. This isn't criticism, this is actually misinformation about how Kubo has built his story. If you believe this, then you're ignoring clear foreshadowing that he has established within the plot. This is probably one of the most infuriating takes because it's so easily disproven by Kubo's own words, as well as the manga itself. People who claim that Kubo made everything up as he went along clearly haven't done basic research. In multiple interviews, Kubo explicitly stated after he finished drawing chapter 1, he already knew that Ichigo's dad Isshin would be a Shinigami. This proves that major plot elements were planned from the very beginning and not improvised or retconned. During a interview section within the Spirits Are Forever With You light novels, Kubo revealed his systematic foreshadowing philosophy. Kubo states that foreshadowing is basically, oh, I see, this is connected to that. Kubo deliberately creates dormant foreshadowing that only activates when later plot points are introduced. It's staggering just how much Kubo foreshadowed in the early chapters of Bleach. Ichigo's hollow mask glimpses appear in chapters 63 to 68 during Urahara's training. The first hint at Ichigo having hollow powers, which occurs 100 plus chapters before the Soul Society arc reveal, where the hollow mask activates against Byakuya. Then you have Odaman Zangetsu's true name being censored in chapter 63. This was later revealed by Kubo to be Ichibei erasing the name Yhwach, and this censorship itself was foreshadowing. The visual foreshadowing includes Zangetsu's deliberate resemblance to Yhwach from 1000 years ago, with Tensa Zangetsu resembling teenage Yhwach. Chapter 220 shows White explicitly telling Ichigo, "I am the real Zangetsu," and people dismissed this as misdirection when it was literally revealed to be true during the Blade is Me in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. Isshin's spiritual awareness appears in chapter 7 when Kon senses his spiritual pressure during the rock trap. Isshin always knew when Kon was in Ichigo's body versus when Ichigo himself was in the body. He never once called Kon Ichigo, always using pronouns like him instead. His call to Karakura Hospital demanding beds and saying "tell your boss it's a request from Kurosaki" hinted at his connection to Ryuken Ishida 400 plus chapters earlier. Then you have the Shiba family connection, which was foreshadowed via Ichigo's identical appearance to Kai and Shiba, and Byakuya's comment that Ichigo looks very much like him when referring to someone who Rukia had cared about. Kubo's postscript within Spirits Are Forever With You categorizes his foreshadowing approach across 4 different levels. There's foreshadowing that he would like all readers to notice, which is surface level stuff. Then there is foreshadowing that he would like only 1 in 4 or 1 in 10 to notice. Then there is foreshadowing that he would like 1 in 1,000 or perhaps 10,000 to notice. This is why readers are wondering, hey, maybe there is a connection between these 2 points. And lastly, then there is the foreshadowing where Kubo plays the long game, where he drops hints in a variety of places which only the most dedicated of Bleach readers will notice, with a good deal of reasoning from their end. In other words, this is foreshadowing that he doesn't expect anyone to find. So yeah, it's absolute insanity to even say that Kubo didn't plan anything when you have direct quotes from the author speaking about his methodology of foreshadowing. Yeah, this bad take is one of the most misinformed, and anyone making this argument hasn't actually analyzed Bleach, and they are actively choosing to ignore overwhelming evidence in favor of just lazy criticism. Okay, so there you have it. That was the 3 bad takes that I've debunked within this video. Do let me know if you've dealt with these bad takes in the past. If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about each of them, then let me know in the comments. And do leave your suggestions for what other Bleach bad takes you want me to debunk in my next video. I read through every single comment, so leave your suggestions under this video, and the ones that get the most likes I'll debunk in the next installment of this series. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.